Because you think that's a big machine.
Here they
You don't
have,
see it, and it's tiny somehow, isn't it?
Martin, here they have the room that it was built in, right next to it. And it's an enormous room. They have a little piece of the machine. It should have had the whole wall, which is nothing there but desks anyway now. So you can get a feeling of what it was to use a gigantic device.
They gave half of it. Half of
It's
it,
empty.
half of it they gave the Smithsonian. It's big enough right now. I mean,
It's only a third of its actual size.
anybody
but
who
it's
appreciates the thing, it's good. There's enough there to get a thrill, and if you're not turned on by it anyway, it would, having the whole thing.
Hey,
How about having it
there, you
work?
can twist those little feely switches, and it's
People around
terrific.
here arguing about the cost of keeping videotape and the cost of keeping this kind of material. The cost of keeping that type of material is 100 times more than the cost of keeping videotape.
Absolutely.
There's only a finite number of pieces of the ENIAC around, whereas there's.
But what do you get from looking
videotape
at it?
goes on and on forever. And
What I would love
what do you
to
get from looking
Boy,
at the spirit
hey,
of
I'll tell you, I mean, in terms of the technology at the time, I can take you between that one and Whirlwind and the way
I
way
agree,
the
there's
things
lots
that
of
were
fun
done.
games looking at it, but.
No, I mean, in terms of a bunch of engineering disciplines.
Hey, I think we're off video. And we really want to start on time tomorrow morning, so why don't we have,
It's going to be part of it.
another 10 minutes of different.
We have a 9:30 pickup outside of the museum building. Right, 9:30, 8:30, 8:30, 9:30.
No, 9:30.
9:30 tonight. 9:30 tonight.
Tomorrow
9:30 tonight to the Holiday Inn, 8:15 tomorrow morning from the Holiday Inn.
So we can take people back to the Holiday Inn.
Oh, fine.
Okay.
One of the interesting. One of the interesting things that I see emerging from the discussion, which is where I would have started, is the motivation why people are interested in the history of computing. And Mike is interested in one thing, Gordon is interested primarily in something else. I'm interested in yet a third thing, speaking not as the director of the Babbage, but as a historian. I'm interested in motivation. So all of these devices don't do a thing for me. They don't move me at all when I see them.
Motivation and what's that?
Motivation, why people did these things. What were they interested in? How did the
And that's
industry
probably why you
develop?
shouldn't be in that business, because if you don't understand that at a gut level, then you shouldn't write about it, because that, as an engineer,
Nobel Prize winning
Fine,
physicist who said you
perfect.
can't do the history of physics
Right
unless
on.
you lived it.
Right
I don't
on.
believe that. That's
Right
false.
on.
If that's
Exactly.
the case, there would be no
I'll
such
be-
thing.
I'm with you.
Gordon, there would be no such thing as a 17th century historian. There'd be no medievalists around if that's the case. Can only people who lived through it do the history? That's nonsense.
I think it helps an enormous amount, I mean, in terms
It
of.
might
Yeah.
to do certain kinds of
Absolutely.
things, yes.
I like the way it's being kept right now.
Richard, are you getting this?
I got something about video. Could I say, maybe, are we at the point where we're ready to form a committee? I don't know whether that's.
Feasibility
Identify the primary research needs, instructional needs for the naive person, instructional needs for something like that, and say, these are our priorities. And then, I know it sounds terrible, committee that's going to publish a report recommending how to preserve or what to, but isn't that what we were just getting at? Just don't put me on the committee.
There was a booklet that was put out under the, basically written by Nancy Stern, put out under the auspices of the AFIPS History Committee about 4 or 5 years ago, which simply talked about preserving computer-related source materials.
Adapted from the physics people.
Correct, adapted from the physics people. What?
Let's give everybody, can we Xerox that tonight? And I hadn't been able to.
It's in the annals.
It's in the but
Yeah,
if you want to put it in people's hands.
Yeah, let's put it in people's hands. Is that the one you, is it the same one that's been floating around? I saw your name on it once.
What? I didn't write,
you
I
write
was
one?
chairman of the history, I was chairman of the history committee at the time it was
I
done.
remember reading one. Okay.
Whether you appoint a committee or
This is a
not.
beaten up old copy, I don't know how good, but if you want to make the copies
Is that a
tonight.
collection policy, basically?
Basically, it's a.
No, it's guidance to laymen in the computing field saying, please hang on to this stuff. This is why, this is what you ought to do.
Right.
I don't know that it's of much use to people here who are presumably far more sophisticated than what this is aimed at, but if you want to reproduce it tonight, here.
Could I make a point, something that struck us this afternoon? I'm from Lawrence Livermore, and so we're research and development. We're not really trying to teach anything. Sometimes we have used the videotape in times of a PR thing, in terms of, we have family days where we invite the outsiders, members of the families that work there, and this has been a terrific educational in terms of not a class, but tell them what we're doing. But the other thing I think that's very important that we've run into in one of the videotapes that we viewed here is accuracy. In other words, that when we make these things up, I'm not saying that anybody did it on purpose or that there was, fraud or anything, and particularly if we start editing or cutting it up to make a shorter version of this, we've got to be real careful, it seems to me, that you don't change the meaning behind. And I realize it's almost an impossible thing to do, but I think it's a very important task so that we don't give false impressions, that we don't give credit or not give credit to the proper sources in these kinds of things. And I don't think we've addressed that kind of business, and I think whether you're taping somebody and you're interviewing, that you don't twist their words. The same thing is true in videotape. You don't manipulate.
This is close to the question I was getting at, of there isn't the same kind of reviewing process for a lot of the videotapes that is being produced that there is for the written papers. And so by the time a paper gets published, it gets looked at by a number of eyes, reviewed, revised, etc. And a number of us that are putting out these tapes that have to be edited, there isn't right now, that maybe that's the first step we should take, is make sure that they're reviewed before.
There's also a danger there, though. I think one of the real advantages of videotape is the fact that you have this person there, and it's about the closest we can do today to get that presence. And with a paper, yes, you've had time to sit down, work out all the words, and if you're trying to throw something, say, cover up some unpleasantness, it's easy to do in words. I mean, it's one of the real advantages of having a piece of paper. But in a videotape, you can catch not only the words that are coming out, but the expression, the meanings. You can sort of tell the guy sort of demurs a bit what he's trying. He may be covering something. Which is
Dave, what she's referring to is a produced tape about a machine. Mm-hmm. And that's different than the guy standing up. You can't change his words. I mean, if he lies and with a smile on his face, he lies.
But you can review at the script level, really.
You can review it, and if you keep the original material, you capture a little more than you have actually with an edited and reviewed paper.
Martin, you can't do that unless the person is talking from a script.
No, but
I give hundreds of talks and I never have a script. I mean, I don't have a written text.
Produced tapes.
No, but you're an exhibit, not a producer. No, I mean, in the present context, for example, where it's being filmed at the moment,
A live exhibit.
you're not speaking from a script, so we take what you say.
Yes, you're saying you ought to review the script to make sure that what the person is going to say is worthwhile. You can't review the scripts of the people that are coming to talk at your sessions here.
No, of course not, but then we know that. But thinking of the ENIAC film that we saw earlier this evening with Arthur Burks reading a script, that could have been reviewed.
Oh, yes.
That's better. That's
the production level, not the...
That was precisely what isn't particularly valuable on videotape, because there were things in there that were, but Arthur Burks' statements were exactly the same as his statements in print, and they're much easier to read in print.
The only thing that was valuable about that film was two very crucial
They didn't even know that I was an MTC memory tester.
Well,
They thought it was, the Whirlwind tested the memory.
The last time was, could have been later, the last time was the.
They don't even have our little 5-digit multiplier after all. That's what, without that, we wouldn't even get off the grid.
So this is Forrester and Killian's first shot. So they did have the Charles Project though as a
Yes. Right.
Don't know what it's about.
The whole thing,
What I'm doing on the consulting meetings is large systems.
Rescue operations are
I'm doing with Equitable for a long time.
George
One
works and I'm going another. June 27th.
What they do with computers is ridiculous, you know. The bigger the company, the worse. Hey, printing presses.
Actually, it's near MIT, it's not.
Oh, yeah.
They are close by, so you can run over about 5 minutes.
They make a little room on the desk with the terminal. They use the terminal like the paper, and they do the same thing they did before. They have more people than before. I'm unwrapping some of that stuff.
That's good.
It's not exactly an intellectual challenge, but it keeps me out of trouble.
Well, I was
Saved them a few megabytes here.
Very good. Well, I've been pursuing my favorite topic all through the years. Been making some rather good progress in very recent years. And we speak of it these days as achieving an adequate technical understanding of the formal information of organizations. And we speak of information techniques, by which we mean discipline, skills in dealing with information, acquiring it, storing it, retrieving it, presenting it, and the rest. When we speak of an information technology, we're literally speaking of technology in the literal sense, the traditional sense. It's an orderly discourse, an exposition of the techniques. And 3 years ago, we succeeded in producing computer outputs. Well, we succeeded in producing computer outputs from a user's specifications of them, engineering style specifications, bypassing programming. And
we conceived of it. We didn't do much about it.
And if all goes well, what we did then was what Manny Fiore and Jerry Dad, our chief patrons before their retirements, called it information algebra experiment. But what we're talking about now is, we've been calling it prototype, but after rereading the book, I thought pre-prototype might be more appropriate.
Well, that's, I did some of that, and I did the digigraphic system for control data. And that was, literally drawing lines and getting the database to set itself up. And that really, at that point, was 64, I guess. We got a lot of publicity on that because we were on television and everything. Because nobody had ever done anything quite that simple, and made a database.
Oh, I didn't realize you did that. I remember the activity.
Oh, actually, I worked with Charlie Adams. You must remember Charlie.
Oh, yeah, well, he was here in the last session.
Yeah, when Charlie and he did the database for me, he and Gilmore, and when I did the display system on the computer, and we used a PDP-1. This was at ITEC, and ITEC sold a shoot and match to control data, and I went with it. That was, I thought, I could see that we were on the edge of something that wasn't good. Getting the software guys the hell out of the business. They cause all the trouble. I'm trying to do that now in the database business with all these people. I decided the way to do it is to start with the forms that they have. And don't ask them to do anything with the databases. Let us do the database. The database is already there in the forms. And the real problem is when you try to teach them for simpler forms, they don't ever do it. But if you just say, do the same thing you're doing and we'll take care of the rest of it, I think we'd be much better off.
Oh, you're right. That's the way it should have been done all along.
Yeah, we haven't really ever done that. That's right. Just take the redundancy out of it.
Well, we've had this strange idea that today's systems are just obsolete. The important thing is getting on with a new approach and new systems.
On 12 decibels.
I didn't know there are any new systems.
Oh, I did?
They all look like the big.
Well, let's
stop down.
I really don't hear you say that.
Because I'm still pretty close to the equipment as I've always been. I don't see any difference. The stuff in the Word, in the Wang is exactly the same as the 370. The 370 is not much different than the 360. The 360 isn't much different than the one before it.
Well, when I used spoken systems the way I did, I was referring to the business system itself, the application, and the information services given to a given department.
But what we're doing is doing it faster, but we're overwhelmed with data. We don't really deduce it that much. I don't see much in doing it. Graphics and all that is bells and whistles to me. What they do.
Well, I see very large changes in the years immediately ahead. I see the industry and other people see more and more clearly in recent years that the industry is literally where the electrical industry was in the mid-'80s, 1880s, and where the automobile was in the early 1910s.
Yeah, I think so. We've got the tools, but we don't know how to use them, so to speak.
Come on in.
Hello again.
Oh, Art, good to see you, sir.
Norm Taylor.
Greetings. Careful of the wire underneath you.
I haven't had any lunch yet.
Oh, my.
Maybe get something. I'm gonna get a little
Well,
lunch.
the sandwiches haven't arrived. They're being collected at this moment, so. If you want to start with pure coleslaw, you can.
Well,
I send bring you best regards from Steve White. Asked me to say what
how is the?
it's good. He retired, you know, from the slum.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is he completely retired?
Yeah.
Doesn't have an office?
No.
Anybody?
As of the end of last month.
That light too hot, Larry?
In the vehicle.
What's he doing?
Right now, he's writing a book on writing.
Uh-huh.
And this is a good topic for him, I think.
Yes, indeed.
That's pretty good.
I assumed you were going to say writing a book, but I didn't know what the end of the line was.
And then he hopes to finish that by the end of the summer, and then he'll no doubt be writing another book.
Is he living in Connecticut?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, he's a fine fellow. We're going to miss him, though, at the foundation. He provided most of our ideas for the last 13 years. I thought that was a good panel out in San Francisco.
Yeah,
I'm going to
that's all right. I enjoyed it. I don't know, it didn't reach any focus, which perhaps nobody expected it to.
Right. Did you have any, you didn't have any advanced planning? For
No.
Yeah.
No,
I was just one of the, I didn't go to too many of the conference discussions, as a matter of fact, but it was a good one.
What's happened to the initial run, the final run? We discussed Lincoln Laboratory and
How's that?
Irvine and so on.
The Project Charles.
I have a copy of the script.
The transcript, yeah.
Yes.
Right. I've got some edited tape. You saw, I think, one reel of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to decide.
Well, is this going in a way
I think
that...
it's been terrific, yeah.
It's mixed.
What if I can introduce myself?
It's been very good and very
Kelly.
and instructive, relaxed.
On the new edition of the law school.
It's as though the presence of the cameras is completely there. You all seem oblivious to them.
Yes, has mentioned to you it's a new edition of the law school.
Oh, yes. No, I'm enjoying this fine.
I'm over here at the moment interviewing some people who I lectured on.
Is this the one session, the sessions you did with Project Charles? Is this the next one? Have you done any others since then?
No. We'll be heading back to New York for a 5-day tomorrow. Gotta get out some public trial.
Can you even get into my block?
This is going to be valuable material for the MIT archives.
It's not very near to... Yeah. How far would that be?
It's kind of a suburb.
A cup of coffee.
Is that so?
Yes.
I don't know that I'm going to last the course this afternoon. I have to pace myself.
Right.
So,
when you're tired, just move on out.
Right. You're in central New York, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like we could do the two in a day, doesn't it?
I'll be there on Monday, Tuesday. Back up here Wednesday and Thursday.
Well, we'll be down there. Tuesday would probably be the best for us. Would you see us then? Should we make it a particular time?
Particular time, particular place.
Yeah, and then...
We're liable not to lose our way.
Sorry. Never introduced ourselves. Somehow got right into it, but that's okay. When we do talk about ourselves, to go back into childhood, in high school, like to be interested in technology, I think that's valuable.
Okay, well, I think it is. Why don't you get Perry to ask us? I suppose we may hesitate to do that without a little encouragement or provocation. But actually, I do think it's very important.
You gotta turn some of these lights off.
Well, they're rather warm.
If we could, you think you could turn the center one off? That's 1/3 of the heat. Oh, this one. That'll help something. That one's driving me crazy, but I guess you need it. You need it.
That's all right. Well, that doesn't bother me. I didn't know it was there.
No, it's all right if you and I get driven crazy, isn't it? That was very good.
Well, I guess it's just to work out what the impact was.
Don't carry that.
Some background information.
Have you been in communication with Frank Brazil?
Sure, we're seeing him in Boston. Yeah.
And how about,
Now, this is Tuesday, isn't it? What time?
at your convenience?
Thanks.
Are you going to be down Monday and Tuesday?
No, we're Tuesday, I think, so that would be
So,
fine.
do you have your number or something? We have basically changed it, I don't trust my memory.
We're really going to talk more about the machine, and Gordon Brown will be here. Hill is supposed to be here that day too. I'm not positive. I know Gordon Brown will be here. So we'll talk more about the engineering.
Well, one that had much of a role anymore, as you said, did he?
Only that.
Hill? Gordon Brown?
No, Brown. No, not Hill. No.
Oh, I see. I thought you said Hill.
Hill, I thought Hill's going to be here the next day to talk about the world of electronics before World.
I see. All right.
Which I think.
309 1417.
Yeah, Gordon Brown, of course, was Servo Lab when it started, and then head electrical engineering. Became dean of engineering.
Let me get your names down correctly here. Martin?
Martin historian's memory. It's a remarkable feat when one does.
Well, I think it's helpful and interesting and important that we're trying to touch upon some of those things that have made MIT the kind of institution it is. Those, I've been trying to search out those trends and practices and procedures and points of view have made this a very special kind of research university.
Well, I think the overriding thing is that MIT is much more a free enterprise society than most institutions, that a faculty member can do almost anything he wants to if it's honorable and he can raise the money for it.
And those are not easy, but they're not possible.
Well, believe it or not, you can.
Sometimes there are a few budgetary hurdles to get over.
Yeah. But also being honorable is not easy, but possible.
Well, those may be two rather difficult hurdles.
But I think that's
But you know what I mean is that if I need a mathematician to work on my project, I don't have to pass the credentials of the math department to engage him at least for research purposes. I think we're losing some of that now. It's much less true now than it was, you see.
I hope that there can be perhaps some dampening of the growth and the fragmentation aspect. Because one of the great features of this institution has been its integration, the fact that we have a single faculty and we're not split up in ways that most big
But you see,
institutions
the
are.
thing that really led to all these was that they didn't have to be done in the departments. They did. I mean, the things we're talking about, to a considerable extent, succeeded because they did not have to be done in or accepted by the departments.
That's right.
The research, the division-sponsored research had, I think, a degree of independence of the departments that I don't believe it now has. And you know, if you had somebody like Gordon Brown, who was a faculty member, give it some authentication. The constituency for it was really the outside world we were working with, sources of money. And the math department, as a matter of principle, wouldn't take an interest in computers. Warren Loud, a young faculty member who came over and worked with us, did so at the explicit advice from his department. Said if you have any interest in your future career, you won't go out and get yourself associated with any such kind of activity like just numerical computation.
I have a little section in this memo I'm working on called Cognition in the Carpool. That tells the story of how
Wadsworth in mathematics, Schrock and Hurley riding in a carpool during the war and then continuing after the war. One day got to talking about seismology, and Wadsworth said, have you guys not turned to Norbert Wiener's mathematics in analyzing these voluminous seismological records which you can't separate the good from the bad, and they hadn't, but this set them all, and wound up with a project that using the Whirlwind computer, which is an essential part of it, that released information to the oil companies that was worth billions of dollars in the finding of oil.
Yes.
It's a lovely story of this freedom of intercommunication.
Let me see, was it Schrock who recently was working maybe with you in writing that up? Somebody has been in touch with me.
Schrock has written the history of the department now, but I talked with him at length about this. And that led to our associations with Cecil Green and the Geophysics Incorporated and Texas Instruments, and some
I went through it personally.
$15 to $16 million of support.
Anyway, it's one of these things that people are starting to be concerned about.
Now, you said before that Norbert Wiener, in his wanderings around the campus, never came to the lab and so on. But I
came to other places.
Oh yes, he used to come to my office too. But I assume that you knew about him thoroughly. He must have been a figure that everybody knew.
Oh yes, but you see, I never saw anything in his work that was really relevant to what we were doing. His time series analysis, interesting enough, but that's what was mostly visible.
Yes.
Or really, except through this channel you just spoke of, seismic data, and then using computers to analyze it would be related. But as far as the computer itself or its logic, I don't believe that I know of anything that he has done that had a direct influence on the machines themselves.
Now, the word cybernetics, for example, was coined well after, and the concepts, in any case,
Basically the feedback.
Basically the feedback concepts, yes. The concepts were part of the general
This is probably the one that would
literature of electrical engineering and servo mechanisms.
The tremendous influence that he had on so many different things can't be minimized.
Apparently runs to the direction of medicine, statistics, and there are people who think that he's made
Gordon Brown
major
was talking
contribution,
yesterday about how he really, it was out of his ideas that the artificial arm came and lots of the kinds of work that's going on, and Bob Mann's work on the handicapped here, and
his influence was pervasive, but the question that Jay is addressing was, ended this particular operation, and
where you would have thought that he would have had inserted himself more than he did,
Well, he went through phases, wanting to have nothing to do with classified material, and we went through phases of the work being classified and declassified.
What are you talking about?
Norbert Wiener.
Wiener.
Yes. And there's considerable parallel here with the influence of von Neumann in the Pennsylvania-Princeton environment. That is, the general lay assumption is one of a direction of causality from von Neumann to the work.
Have you read that book, the dual biography of von Neumann and Wiener?
No.
It's a very
Stearns
interesting. One that Freeman Dyson took offense out because he thought it denigrated von Neumann. But the author of this book took the view that Wiener had a moral sense that von Neumann didn't have.
A moral sense?
Led him to say that he would not do anything that would contribute to warfare. For example, that phase of it. And von Neumann's constant and preoccupation with atomic energy and weapons and ballistic missiles and
My,
so
my,
on.
my, I mean, all my experiences left me with the feeling von Neumann was a much greater and much more effective person. Von Neumann was the kind, I mean, Wiener, you really had to discuss Wiener's topic if you were going to talk to Wiener. And with von Neumann, you could raise any subject with him, and he would launch into it, and within 10 to 15 minutes, he would be at the absolute heart of it, whether he seemed to have had any prior experience or not.
I had a few experiences like that, and I also got to know Wiener pretty well, and I can't quite figure out why. But somebody must have been in one of those committees I was on at this faculty club or something, because he used to get together with me and talk about computers, and all he would talk about was he thought there was a way of programming computers to write mystery stories. That was his hobby, writing mystery stories. And he used to go on and on and on. And I really didn't have to say anything. I just sit there and listen to this.
One of the things I got him to do was to write some pieces about S.S. Van Dyne and his mystery stories.
Yes.
S.S. Van Dyne was a pretty good mathematician.
Yes, he was.
And he wrote one book. Robert became a friend of his, became a member of one of the Conan Doyle societies. And
Yes, he told me all about that.
he wrote this book and let Wiener have an advance copy, and Wiener wrote an article for the Technology Review predicting how it would come out. And he was wrong.
like his chess game.
Well, one of the more memorable
That was one of
experiences.
the lighter aspects of.
Well, one of the more memorable experiences I had in that particular area was when I was a very junior, I think probably a research assistant here, and there was some kind of a meeting of mathematicians or people doing manual computation or something. Anyway, lunch was at the Smith House, which used to be up the river here, and people were sitting at a long, narrow table, and I found myself sitting at the end of the table with Wiener on one side and von Neumann on the other. And they were paying absolutely no attention to me, and they spent the whole lunch period discussing how you would translate modern tabloid headlines into four-letter Renaissance English words. Wiener's topic, no doubt.
That's right. And he never, as far as I'm concerned, on several occasions that he talked to me, he never left the mystery story theme. That was it.
Well, we
He remembers dates and conversations in a way that I wish I could.
Well, Jim, you know, has spent his life since he retired on his history.
Yes.
And he's well equipped. It's his major goal. Very Piggott understands what he's doing. He's taken his time. It's going along very well. It'll be a marvelous piece of work if it's ever published.
Yes, yes.
He's trying to find out what you're going to have for lunch. Go ahead.
Well, I'll
grab a sandwich.
I'll go around. I'll come back in just a minute.
Okay. That was very good rounding up of the material. I think that the right sequence would have been this one first, last week second, and the one we did first third. You just reversed it, but it doesn't make a bit of difference.
Getting people to be here at the same time is almost impossible. It's about the best sequence we could get with the schedule.
But you have enough overlap.
Yeah.
That had you reversed them, you might not have had the same content in them.
Yeah. I'd like to now do the whole thing all over again. But now we have all the questions right. But there are so many more things to be done.
Are doing that task, that it will be appropriately cared for. There is the history book on Horween. The same authors are now doing one on the SAGE system.
How are they? Oh, good.
That's what we videotape.
And I have my hands more than full pulling together my more recent career on system dynamics and the work we're doing on the behavior of national economies, which is an activity that grows in many ways out of all of this other stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's going to stretch out as long as I can really be making any plans for at this stage.
Jay, that raises a question that was on my mind and I gently probed last time, but didn't get the answer I expected, so let me probe a little harder. You went, when you left Whirlwind, you went into the Sloan School, you developed systems dynamics. You were obviously interested in economic and social science applications. Earlier in that 48 talk, you had anticipated a lot of social science use of the computer. And what I asked last time was how much discussion or awareness was there of all these other uses. But it strikes me you must have, in some way, have developed an interest in social science kinds of things, in analysis of human behavior and relations and so on, at a very early stage. I mean, when you were doing Whirlwind on for airplane simulation, hadn't you already developed a kind of amateur incidental interest in society and economics and so on?
Well, I think you could say that at that time we saw the computer as a universal tool that could touch practically every area of activity. And I don't have any clear recollection at this stage of what I meant by that phrase in that paper, certainly.
Were you an avid newspaper reader? Were you interested in politics?
Yes, Gordon Brown gave me a subscription to Fortune magazine back in the mid-40s sometime. And Al Seiss, who worked in Gordon's group, was a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal, and I think perhaps picking up that thread, I have read those publications from probably, I don't know beginning when, but certainly from the mid-40s on, and how much before that, I don't know. And I read the public press, the business press, and even then, with more care than the technical press. And so the nature of the issues and the problems that would be revealed in that reading would certainly have been, something that we would be thinking about. But when you come specifically to a question like, was I then aware of the things that perhaps I am now doing, I think the answer to that has to be not really, because I took a year after going to the Sloan School to figure out why I was there. I had no duties in that first year except to try to decide what I was there for. I did not teach any courses. And it was the presumption of other people, and I think mine, and it could be revealed by the kind of proposal we originally put into the Ford Foundation for the financial support. I think we were expecting that my role there would be either the use of computers for management business data processing, or the pursuit and extension of the field that was then and now called operations research. And I really discarded both of those on the basis that operations research did not seem to be dealing with the big issues of why corporations succeed and fail. Interesting corners of what goes on, but not really the central focus of what made the losses of market share, the bankruptcies, and the great successes. And the area of business data handling, my reasons may not have been as valid as they could have been, but I felt that the field was moving too fast. Too many people on the outside were in it. The banks, the insurance companies, the computer companies, they were all pursuing it. And it did not seem likely that we would have a decisive impact on the direction. There was just so much going on and so many people. And I think it's true in terms of what we might have done. Of course, academic research in that area has continued and may be having an adequate impact. But anyway, it seemed to me it wasn't going to be.
There's the factor, too, that at least two professors in the Sloan School had already staked that out as their turf.
That wouldn't have bothered me. But I don't remember that I felt that it was something I really wanted to get involved in. So what happened was that in talking to people in industry, in this case largely people in General Electric, I found that the kind of thing that really concerned them was why was the employment fluctuating over a 2-to-1 ratio over a period of 3 or 4 years in their household appliance division. What really accounted for this? They kind of talked about it as being changes in market and demand, but they weren't quite convinced that was true. And out of those discussions, I began to do some hand computing of what would happen month by month in a system like that, looking on it as essentially a feedback system. I don't know quite why I gravitated to that view, except, it's just part of the whole background.
Yep.
And then identifying what had to be the management policies that would lead to the management, the correction of production rates and inventories and so forth. And you do that just on what you can do on one notebook page. And you begin to see that it's rather fundamental to the internal structure of the system that they are likely to have this kind of instability. And then we moved that into actually a much more comprehensive simulation, which was put on a MIT computer along about 1957. And that first paper on it, came out in the Harvard Business Review in 1958. And I believe sold more reprints than any other Harvard Business Review paper up to that time.
Very good.
And is essentially the same thing as Chapter 2 in my Industrial Dynamics book. And that began to kind of shape the idea of simulation applied to social systems, where, of course, it was a well-known kind of thing with respect to engineering systems. And the application of feedback ideas that I think, in general, it would be safe to say, wouldn't it, Gordon, that feedback as it was seen in engineering by most people in the field was seen as something that applied to those devices and circuits over there on the table, but they really did not think about it as applying to them in their own operating, personal, psychological, and managerial setting.
No.
And we began to see this process, and I wouldn't say we were the first to necessarily, but perhaps with the intensity and clarity that it was the fundamental process underlying all change of all sorts, every place. All growth, all goal-seeking, all equilibrium. And that you move from that to the idea that and I'm indebted to Gordon for this. Gordon said to me once, nature doesn't differentiate, nature only integrates. That is an absolutely overwhelming and powerful statement. It says that engineering and science have been, I think, tremendous amount of time has been lost by Newton inventing the differential equations. If the whole field of mathematics had been launched in terms of integrations rather than differentiation, it would have been tremendously more productive. It's essentially true, I believe, that the process of differentiation has been very difficult to define in mathematics. It's a concept that's very hard to deal with, and largely it's because it's a figment of the mathematician's imagination, that there is no place in nature where differentiation occurs.
Not so fast.
Okay. All right.
Not so fast.
Which do you want to?
Well, I tend to count a differential equation as